Hi everyone, Frosty from Fall and Resist here, and I want to talk about what is possibly the most iconic metal album to ever be created, Metallica's Black Album. Now, the thing that prompted me to actually talk about this is that there's a 30th anniversary of the album coming out, where we have a whole bunch of different musicians covering all the songs on there. So you have people like Miley Cyrus and Elton John and Chad Smith, and lots of different people who have been influenced by this album. For its 30th anniversary, they're recording some of the bits and pieces, and it's absolutely amazing to think so many musicians have been influenced by a metal album in such a fashion. But to give you a little bit of background, they're at about 16.8 million copies sold just in the US alone. If you look at the stats on Spotify, it is an amazing amount of times the tracks have actually been listened to, and it is a very, very iconic album. Few things about it that makes it so iconic. It was the decision to take on Bob Rock. Now, they didn't like, and when I say they, I'm talking about Metallica, they didn't actually like what Bob Rock produced before. It was like Motley Crue and Bon Jovi, these highly polished sort of sounds that were coming out there, but they chose him nonetheless. And it probably was a really good career decision, and the sound is actually quite polished. But that is also the reason why it's so criticized, because there wasn't really the guts to it and the thrash sort of feel that went a little bit over the top. But look, the hooks were really amazing. I'm going to play some of the bits and pieces of the hooks for you for a second. So probably the most iconic, Enter Sandman, of course. Let's fast forward it. I cringe a bit because we played this so much. When we were playing really early on, we played this song over and over and over again, and we just got so sick of actually playing it all the time. But that just shows you the influence that it had. But, even the chorus is so catchy and hooky. Now, it's not all doom and gloom in terms of like catchiness, and I'm not saying that catchiness isn't metal. I'd be quite hypocritical if I was to say that, because we have catchy songs ourselves. But there are some really heavy parts to this song. Sad But True, probably one of the classics. Which is insanely heavy for this sort of a thing, right? And then, of course, you have the softer tracks that you have in there, particularly Nothing Else Matters, which it's reported that James Hetfield was really worried about Nothing Else Matters, and that a lot of the heavy fans that are out there, Metallica fans, would puke over it and think it was a terrible song. And it's very, very soft, but it's one of the ones that has the most plays on the album, which is really quite amazing in itself. But look, probably the lesser known ones that people don't really listen to very much. I mean, Holier Than Thou. Which is much more like their thrashy roots. The same sort of thing could be probably said for The Struggle Within. But the point that needs to be made about that is that if you have a look at the Spotify statistics, these songs are actually the least listened to. So really, when we talk about Enter Sandman and you talk about Nothing Else Matters and Unforgiven even, these are the ones that actually made the album really, really popular, and the ones that were probably most far removed from their metal sound, which is really quite interesting. The other thing that I'll say too is that Kirk has actually reported saying that they were playing the song And Justice for All live. And they said they look around the crowd and everyone's got these bored looks on their faces because it's such a long song. And the thing about that, and then of course they walked off, and the thing about that was he said, well, we're not writing songs like that anymore. It doesn't seem like anyone cares. But however, you talk to any metalhead that's sort of true metalhead, they'll say, you know, And Justice for All, Master of Puppets, you know, the best albums that were ever written by a thrash band. So other things to think about. Some other points, though, that really get me when it comes to this album is that James Hetfield himself was around 28. They were all in their 20s, which is amazing to think that an album will be produced of this caliber in your 20s, which is amazing. Lars, Jason, and Kirk were all going through divorces during the recording of this, so there was a lot of emotion and a lot of issues that were probably happening. They would have been overworking. It would have been constant and wouldn't have stopped. But you can't say that their reach wasn't far with this album. It was huge, right? They went on a tour that went for about 18 months around the whole world with this album, and they really opened it up for bands to tour the world. Metallica really brought heavy metal to the masses, but my argument still stands. This is more of a rock album than it actually is a metal album. And as a rock album, it's brilliant. If I take off my metalhead hat and say, this is another band, this wasn't the thrash band Metallica that wrote Master of Puppets, that wrote And Justice for All, Dyer's Eve, like tracks like that. If I take that off, then I can appreciate this album for what it is. I think it's absolutely brilliant. It is just feels so disappointing. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is this is why metalheads have a hard time with Black Album. It's a brilliant album. So well produced, really well written, and really influential. But is it metal? Is it just their descent into hard rock? And one would argue that all the albums afterwards are actually quite hard rock. One thing I will say though, and I see this question come up, you know, Metallica sold out, Metallica sold out. There was an interview that Jason had where they talked about, you know, did you guys sell out? Like, are you just living off the royalties of the Black Album? You know, those sorts of things. And Jason turned around and said, after we finished And Justice for All, we had lawyers and other people come in and talk to us, and we were already set up before we even started Black Album. So when you think of that, they walked into it, money was fine, we have no problems, we're just going to go in and make whatever we want. I say good on you. Like, make exactly what you want. But at the same time, you've got to remember that metalheads are diehard fans. And those sorts of changes in your sound and movements away from where your roots were are going to create issues, and they're going to create dissension within your fan base. That being said, I still crank it on occasion. I actually like Load and Reload too. Just have to remember sometimes not to think too hard that it's James Hetfield singing and Kirk wailing on the wah pedal. Hey, I'm really interested to see what you think about the Black Album, what you think about the 30th anniversary, and whether you think that that's actually a good idea or a bad idea. As always, thank you so much for listening in for what I have to say, and if you like this sort of stuff, I'll keep making these videos. Talk to you soon.